New multi-viewer magic from Ensemble Designs. Stunning detail and simple setup. Easy, click-to-fill configuration from your Mac, PC, or iPad. The new Avenue Multi-Viewer from Ensemble Designs.
So this is the Amberfin Academy. And I'll talk about captions now. Well, so what is the problem? What is the problem with captions? Well, television needs to be accessible to everyone, not only us here with perfect sight and hearing. So we need an accessible service that can actually be delivered, which is independent of how the content is being broadcast today. So with the ever-increasing consumption of programming over the internet, the FCC here in the US put in place something called the 21st Century Communications Act, and there it is. And the overall goal of this really is to put something in place, some regulations for the internet that already exist for traditional broadcast today. So this was introduced officially in 2012 and started with content that had been previously broadcast on television. And if unedited, now if you wanted to broadcast it on the internet, you had to have some captions. Following on from that, in March 2013, you had to do this for live as well. So if you were doing a simulcast, then you had to make sure again that your internet had some captioning. And pretty much by the end of the year, everything that is edited, it could be a promo, a highlights package, whatever you broadcast on the internet has to have those fantastic things called captions. So if I have a quick look back now, we're going to look back at the history of captions, and we're going to see that in 1927 we actually had pictures and sound co-timed on a screen. And you might be surprised to learn that that was a long time ago, but we didn't really have a real captions television system until the 1970s. And ever since then it's actually changed, and it's been different in the US and in Europe and in Australia. So the real breakthrough came in the 1970s with the Europeans developing something called teletext, which became World System Teletext, and the US Electronics Industry Association, long words, developing 608 closed captions. Now, both of these systems actually still exist today. They've been adapted for HD broadcast to create such standards as 708, and new standards such as SMPTE time text down here, are more recently been added to cater for the world of internet broadcasting. So this technology has been around for some time now, but as we all power on into the file-based world of broadcast and internet, captions really aren't as straightforward as they seem. So how do Amberfin approach the creation of file-based captions to make a workflow that's testable, scalable, and achievable today? So, well, we looked back at the problems associated with video codecs, with wrappers, with transcoding, and how Amberfin actually solved these previously. So, in the case of transcode farms, with all the many gazinters and the many gazouters, such as MPEG-2, DNxHD, AVC Intra, MXF, GXF, MOV, when transcoding from all these inputs to all these outputs, you can see here the matrix becomes quite overwhelming and really quite untestable. So, in this case, the introduction of a mezzanine format in the middle, you can see reduce the number of individual transcode combinations and therefore the associated test matrix required. So this simplified the process and made it testable and made it far more efficient. So if we add all these fantastic new captioning formats in here as inputs and outputs that are commonly used and often deployed as kind of pre-processes and post-processes, we end up with thousands of different transcode combinations that are complex and again completely untestable. So at Amberfin, the same thing happened. We applied the same mezzanine principles to our captioning workflows, and we utilized a mezzanine captions format in the heart of the process, and not as a pre or post process. So we've chosen something called SMPTE 436 for our mezzanine, and it provides support for all VBI and VANC, including our captions. So if we identify the captioning source on the way in, we can now process the captions data at the same time as our video and audio, and again reduce those thousands down to a manageable number. And hey presto, it may just work. So one common thing looking back around the world today is that captioning pretty much everywhere is becoming law. So strangely enough, often video and audio are optional, but the captions are actually mandated. So you might not actually broadcast the sound or the pictures of part of a program. And actually for some of those talent shows out there, that's not a bad thing. But if you don't broadcast these things, you obviously may go bust. But if you don't broadcast the captions, you may get fined. Now, captions may not be a revenue generator for your business, but they do have a definite cost associated. So where do we find these beautiful things called captions? Well, mentioned before the standards for SD in accordance with this thing called 608. It's an analog waveform, and in the US it's carried on something called line 21. Now the technology was actually good enough back in the 1970s to decode those captions and display them on your television screen. Now, for various reasons today, the 608 standard is still being broadcast with beautiful white capital letters on a black background. You've probably all seen them. Despite the fact that many modern televisions today can show graphics, fonts, colours, just like a PC can, we're actually stuck in our broadcast environments with an ecosystem from the 1970s. But actually, the one thing is, it generally works pretty much everywhere. 90s came along, fantastic world of digital transmission, digital tape, higher powered CPUs, and something the new 708 standard was created, which was pretty much digital and could therefore be carried from digital blanking from end to end of our broadcast systems. Great. So with 708, we should have seen the new era in captioning television was going to be amazing, but it wasn't really widely adopted. And that was really because there was no commercial benefit to the broadcasters to do that. So despite the fact that 708 could handle 32 languages, new graphics, fonts, and even some colors, it wasn't adopted by the majority of broadcasters or content owners. And today, most broadcasters still use 608 captions. They just happen to be carried in a 708 stream. So where do I find my captions before I make this first file? Well, in the US, again, captions are likely to be found on the tape. They're either stored in VBI for SD or in VANC for HD. Now, in Europe, however, captions are usually inserted into the stream at the point of transmission. And so you may find some in the VBI for SD, but more likely, someone's going to deliver an STL kind of file with your tape. Europe, however, is changing, and there is an Australian standard called OP47, which uses SD-based captions in an HD carriage mechanism, and Europe are looking at this, and it is gaining some momentum across Europe as well. So why do I care about tapes? Of course we do. Well, by and large, the files that you have within your facility will have originated from some kind of tape. And in the US, again, it's usually present on the tape, so that's fantastic. It should be so easy to find my captions in my file. Unfortunately, as you expected, this doesn't actually happen very often, and the captions can be found in many places. In fact, depending on the device used to capture and create the file, it could be carried in either a proprietary vendor mechanism, or it could be carried in a standards-based mechanism like SMPTE 436. And that carries all of our VBI and VANC in MXF, including our beloved captions. Well, in Europe, if you even have captions on a tape, then again, the same capture problems can exist. So, should we invent one more global format to solve all the problems? No, absolutely not. What we really need to do is utilize those existing standards to produce good file-based workflows and practices. So again, if we invent more caption formats, we're only adding to the complexity of the system. If we stick to existing formats and move to our mezzanine workflow, life should be easier. So let me get back to the FCC and internet captions, seeing as we all watch a lot more content over the internet now. And what we need to do is just use SMPTE time text, as I mentioned earlier. Time text is a sidecar XML. It's independent of the compression format. As a broadcaster or someone providing content, if you deliver a SMPTE TT file for your content, then you're actually legally covered. Fantastic. But it is likely that you still want to be in business, and so you still need to create captions for many of the playback devices there are out today. This means creating SMPTE time text and other formats like QuickTime, Smile, SAMI, DXFP, SCC, etc. So really summing up, try to plan for captions at the earliest stage. This will actually lead to less pain later on, supposedly. Utilizing a transcode system with captions mezzanines makes good sense and reduces the complexity. Process captions in the middle of your workflow and further reduce the test matrix, and use SMPTE time text to meet your legal FCC obligations. So if you'd like to know more about what Amberfin can do for your caption workflows, then please come and talk to us, any of our team here, and they'll help you. There's also a free white paper. I did say the words free white paper on amberfin.com, so if you'd like to go and download that, you can and find out more about captions. And also, if you've enjoyed my ramblings here, This is Bruce's Shorts Live, part of the Amberfin Academy presentations. And if you sign up over there to Bruce's Shorts, then you actually can receive one short training video free of charge about the industry every week.